Good morning, everyone. This is Evelyn Ray with the ISSA Triad of North Carolina. Thank you, folks, for joining day 2 of our 2020 Security Summit. Yesterday, we had a great day of workshops, and today we have a day of keynote sessions and breakout sessions and 2 panels that are going to be taking place throughout the day. So please check your schedules to see if there's any last minute sessions you'd like to sign up for. I would like to thank our gold sponsors, Checkpoint and the Teneo group. They held some workshop sessions yesterday, and today they are kicking off our presentation day, our conference day with a keynote. The speaker is Craig Johnson of the Teneo group, and he's going to be talking about the good, bad, and ugly migrating to the cloud. I do have one announcement. We have 40 $25 Amazon gift cards that are going to be given away. Those will be delivered via email. They're e-gift cards. So what you'll have to do is check your email and see if you are one of the lucky winners. And that's just a bonus to joining us and participating. And so it's 8:03. I believe these guys wanted to give a couple more minutes for people to join. So there may be a little bit of silence here, but we will get started in just a minute. Thanks so much. I see we still have a few people joining. For those of you that have just joined, I want to welcome you to the 2020 Security Summit for the ISSA Triad of North Carolina. This is Evelyn Ray, and I would like to just give out a couple of announcements. Number one, I'd like to thank our keynote speaker, Craig Johnson from the Teneo group. They are our gold sponsors. Also Checkpoint, they are our gold sponsors. They'll be giving the keynote session today, our opening keynote session, and Craig Johnson's going to be speaking to us about the good, the bad, and the ugly of migrating to the cloud. One quick announcement, we'll be giving away 40 $25 Amazon e-gift cards. So check your email. You may be a lucky winner. These guys are going to kick off here in just a minute. I know they wanted to give a couple minutes in the beginning here for folks to join. So Craig, you just start when you feel ready. Thanks so much, everyone.
So this is Craig Johnson. I am going to get started. I'm hoping people can hear me and hoping somebody will make sure that they tell me they can hear me.
I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. All right, so today we're going to welcome everybody to the ISSA Triad Conference. I'm privileged enough to have one of the keynote speaks. I'm hoping everybody takes something out of this speak. If not, please let me know, either good or bad. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the idea from this is to talk about it from the views of a cybersecurity integrator, who is us. And what we do as an organization is we're an engineering firm that helps our customers and enterprises with their cybersecurity issues. We started and evolved from the beginning in the network space. And as our customers have started to move into the cloud, we also moved to the cloud with them. So what we're going to talk about today is what we saw, some stories about how things happened, and what you can do to make your transition to the cloud a little more effective and easy. So I'm going to jump right in and get started. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. You can just use the chat, and we can go from there. So let's get started. So, of course, I'm going to start a little bit with the cloud and adoption of the cloud and where do we stand. So everybody's moving to the cloud some way or another. Folks are moving to the platform as a service, also moving to the infrastructure as a service. And most everybody has been doing something with a software as a service like Office 365 or Salesforce or G Suite. Or you name it, there's an application or a service that you're using today that's actually running in the cloud. But what we're not going to talk about today is the dollars and cents about it. What we're going to talk about is the inevitability of your old data center versus moving into your new data center, which is the cloud. Can you use the old wagon wheel or the water wheel to power your mill, or do you plug into the wall? So that's what we're going to talk about. We think the choice is obvious. We think that the idea of using the cloud is good and beneficial to everyone. So from the perspective that we're going to talk about today is we're not going to talk about the dollars and cents, but just one more piece on that is that if you look at how much money is spent in IT infrastructure as a whole and how much is being spent on the public cloud, it's very minimal. But what we're really going to talk about is where the rubber meets the road. We're going to talk about what's ineffective about your private data centers today and how the public data centers or public clouds actually help with that. And then what happens as you migrate. So let's talk about it. What we start talking about is every idea that you do inside your IT space or as a business starts with a plan. All good things start with a plan. So what happens with this environment? Sorry, I got ahead of myself. All good things start with a plan. So in this environment, when you're in your data center environment and you need more space, you just add it, right? But it comes with a cost. So what's in this environment, we're talking about growth is inevitable. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is when I do a presentation, I always lay out a little bit of fear to folks. And then I talk about how do we solve that fear or how that fear can be solved. So inside the cloud, as people are migrating in the cloud, what Gartner is saying is 90% of organizations will inappropriately share sensitive information. And some of the case studies I'm going to show you today do that. The fear part is that 95% of that is going to be your fault. And who's responsible for that? So one of the things that we're going to talk about, and you're going to hear it over and over in this presentation, is the idea of visibility, of if you can see into the cloud, you can do a little bit more. So inside your data center, you had clear vision, right? Inside there, you were able to see the bottom of your pool. You had clear edges. You had everything that you needed because you had complete control. But as you move into the cloud, the water gets a little murkier. You can't really see the bottom. The edges don't look as well as they're supposed to. So your visibility is bad. So would you prefer diving into a swimming pool that you can see the bottom, or diving into the waterfalls where you can't and there might be a rock underneath of you? So part of our idea here is visibility is very important. With visibility, you can get compliance, but the end result is responsibility. And no, I'm not going to talk about the shared responsibility model until later, because the end result is it's your data, no matter if it sits in your data center or in the public cloud, it's your data, it is your responsibility. So a question that I have to ask for folks is, have you been hacked? You know, first of all, have you moved to the cloud? Are you using things in the cloud? And have you been hacked? So here's a neat little statistic for you. 25% people don't know that they've been hacked or not. And we're going to talk about something that we did here, or actually Checkpoint did. We're a Checkpoint partner. We work with Checkpoint, and Checkpoint did something that was really unique. And we're going to talk about that in just 1 second here. So the idea of this is that if you don't know you've been hacked, that means you don't know what's happening inside your environment. So you need visibility into there to be able to see that. So this is where I really wanted to jump in for a minute or two and talk about what really is happening before we get into the good and the bad and the ugly. So what Checkpoint did is they decided they were going to stand up their own cloud environment, and they added a honeypot to the front of it. And they just stood this environment up, just to stand it up, just to see what would happen. Within 15 minutes, they had 149 attacks to that honeypot. 92 of them were SSH telnet attacks. One of them was a scripting attack. 7 were attacks on separate TCP and UDP ports, and 49 were network-based attacks. If you look at this screen, you can see they're coming from everywhere. But the point that I have to this, well, let me back up. That was within the first 15 minutes. And so the point to this is, if you're moving to the cloud and you have developers or application development happening in the cloud, what are they doing? They're going out and they're going to stand up an environment, they're going to do some tests, and they may shut it back down. So it only may be living for an hour or 2 hours. But the point of this is that the bad people are out there doing things immediately. As soon as something comes online, it doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter where it's going or what you're doing, they've got evil intentions of either uploading malware or trying to find out what your environment's about within the first few minutes of anything being activated. If you migrated to Office 365, you actually see this in the amount of phishing attacks that have increased inside your environment as your Office 365 comes online. So within 7 days, what happened? You would think that it would stop or level out. Nope, it just kept going. 3.97 million attacks trying to get in and upload malware. That's crazy. Again, the point of this is that there is always bad people trying to do bad things. And if you don't have a plan on how to stop them, and this was just standing up an environment and pointing it to the internet. And if you're trying to bring stuff into the environment, let's go back to the developer that brings something in. They're going to bring in a data set to test their development. Where'd they get that data set from? Did they open up a link to your database? What did they do? So you got to really have a plan. So let's talk about the plan. Everybody has a plan, right? But the point is, the good of the good, bad, and the ugly is that include all the people that are going to be contributing to the environment. Include the security or cybersecurity team to discuss what you're doing and how you're trying to do it in the beginning. The reason for this, and I'll bring up a case study of one of our customers. It's a federal credit union that we've been working with for multiple years. They hired an organization to come in to be their cloud consultants. They're the ones that were thinking about the applications and the data that needed to be moved from the data center over to the cloud. But they really didn't think a lot about how the security was going to work. They were just going to use the native security within the cloud environment. So as we got involved, we were hired as the cybersecurity team to help them migrate to the cloud. As we were talking and reviewing things with them, we realized that some of the things that they were doing is they were publicly allowing public connections to their database. So we reworked the environment, moved it back around, and were able to get it to run. So what was nice about us being coordinating in the beginning was that everybody knew exactly how security was going to work from the beginning, and it was very easy to implement. Just one note, we've also seen where a cloud migration consultant came in, and we had to go in and completely redo their environment to make sure that security was implemented in the beginning. The one thing that I do want to bring up about the good, which you'll hear me repeat again, in the bad and the ugly, is that in the cloud, the way clouds work sometimes, depending on which one you have or is using, they tend to make rebuilding fairly difficult. They think it's easy, but it really is sometimes difficult. So for this specific customer, we've actually had to completely, when we went to do an upgrade for their full environment, it wasn't just a simple upgrade from version 1 to version 2. It was rebuild the entire environment in version 2 and rebuild the entire cloud environment. So with them being a very good planning organization, that worked out well, but they had to go through the process of a complete rebuild, not just a simple version upgrade. So what did we learn out of the good? We learned that collaboration is super important, and being able to see what you're doing, the visibility into the environments, is the second most important thing. But being able to have everybody to work from the development phase and into the production phase, we found with this organization, it worked really well. So, like I said, everybody has to have a plan, right? But plan works great until you get punched in the face. Does anybody know who said that? Well, of course you do now. But the point is that everybody develops a plan. But what do you do when things go wrong? So one of the things that we saw that was bad was when one team really wants to take the lead and doesn't involve all the rest of them. And what I mean by this is a lot of times what we've seen is people that are trying to move to the cloud is, for an example, an organization wants to take their web application that's running and querying their databases locally, and the web application is running locally, and they want to move that to the cloud. So the application team or the development team takes control of that and starts driving it. And they start building out the cloud environment from the development perspective, not from the business perspective. So the bad thing that we saw, and I stole this one a little bit from a larger organization, but I've also seen it in one of our customers, where the applications teams would start building out their environment, and they ended up opening up a connection to their internal database to the public. Now, we know one of these organizations happens to be a company called Capital One. Now that's not our customer, but it's one that's done it that way. We also had the exact same issue with one of our customers where they were looking at developing their environment. So they stood up one instance, one cloud instance for their application, another cloud instance for their database. And as the developers were trying to make things work, they found it easier just to copy the entire database that they had inside their data center over to the cloud without paying attention that the connections within the cloud itself were using the publicly routable addresses versus the internal DMZ connectivity and the links from inside. So what they inadvertently did was they published their internal database to the network. It was eerily similar to what happened to Cap One of making that available. Now, if they had visibility into the cloud as they were doing this, that would have helped them out. One of the points that I'm trying, come across in this and the presentation is to be able to tell you that if you're moving to the cloud, make sure that you integrate some of these things in the very beginning. You might not think, oh, I don't need visibility while I'm doing development. The answer is that's exactly when you need visibility into your cloud, is when you're doing a development. Because if your development goes down a very long path and you don't have that visibility, then you have to go back and correct it after it goes in production. So that sort of leads us down to the next piece. This is just another example that we have seen, and this example was with Amazon, not Amazon, but with an organization exposing their S3 buckets. But what happened to them? They gave up a lot of information because they weren't paying attention of how their credentials and stuff were set up. So if they had this visibility, and one of the things they came back with this environment was the encryption was not activated, even though Amazon and tells you best practices is to make sure everything you do is encrypted. They didn't. The customer chose not to do this, and what happened was they left things exposed because it wasn't encrypted. So again, this was the customer's fault. So now let's talk about the ugly, and this is the one that I really find interesting, and I have, the idea of this is these guys had no plan, and what they ended up to do, and I'm actually using two organizations that we've worked with, and mixing them together to keep everybody's names, to protect everybody's names from this environment. So what did they do? And I call it learning on the fly and never cleaning up. And what do I mean by that? Is that these organizations developed on the fly. Somebody got a requirement from the business space to migrate to the cloud. We want to move our application to the cloud. And another one was we want to move our data to the cloud. And then we want to add our applications there to be able to make it more efficient for all people to get to our connectivity and not have to be dependent on our brick and mortar data centers. So that's a very good business objective. But what they started doing is, instead of either they hired an organization or they started learning on their own. And as they started building out their environments, they realized they needed additional pieces. So when I was talking about instances earlier, where most of the times you'll see one instance and things broken down inside your environment, one of these organizations had 25 separate instances, one for internal database, one for an external database, one for their DMZ application, one for their query application, one for their administrative pieces. And what they were deciding and discovering is that while they were inside their private data center, part of their application and part of the process that they were doing is they siloed things. And historically, building out silos was a very good way of segmenting your environment. But over a period of time, even within their data center, those silos started to become merged and crossed over. And as they moved into the cloud, they ended up moving those same problems with them and activating all these pieces. So as we started getting involved with these customers, we realized that if we were going to try to secure their entire 25 instances, their entire space, it was going to cost an astronomical amount of money because we would have had to put security in front of every one of their instances and then create a redundant environment and then spread it across multiple clouds. It was just going to be super expensive for them to do. So we went back to them, we started talking to them about, we'd love to do this for you, but you're probably better off cleaning up this environment before we go there. Problem is that they were already down this path. They were already running in a production environment with very limited security. So we're still in the process of trying to clean this up. The point of the ugly part of this is that they grew by, just by pure growth and learning this on the fly, and they never went back and thought, is this the right way of doing it? And now the security got involved at the end, and we're looking at it going, yeah, we can start this, but guarantee you, as we put security in one of these instances, we're going to break the other instances. So can we rebuild this into a development environment? And the answer was no, because it was too expensive. So they wanted us to do this on the fly, and we're going to say, if we're going to do this on the fly, well, it's going to cost you production business, because as we break things, it's going to have to be fixed. So that was very bad. The idea of visibility for them didn't really hit home until we were able to show it to them. That we brought this up and we showed them that a couple of their instances that they were calling internal databases were actually being routed to their application through publicly routable addresses within the cloud that they were using. That should have been routed on the backside. And if it was routed on the backside, then you can distribute your security in a different environment. If they would have had visibility as they were going along, if they were looking at it as they were going along, they would have been able to see going, oh, wait a minute, this is in the wrong place. We need to move this. And how do we move it? And they could have asked the proper questions to their cloud migration team or to the cloud providers themselves. So that's all parts of this environment. So I did want to show a couple more items that have happened, and I referenced Cap 1 before, and these are 4 different instances that happened in 2019, and every one of them, if you see what's happening, if they would have had visibility into their environment, they probably would have not have had these issues, because they would have recognized that a database that should have been encrypted wasn't, or they would have recognized that a database was activated to a publicly routable address instead of an internal address and protected behind the scenes. So every single one of these could have been protected by just seeing what's going into there. Going back to the slide that had the clear swimming pool and the murky water, if you can see into the murky water with a pair of scuba goggles, great, and that's what visibility will do for you. So what's the moral of the story? What are the things that we see as a cybersecurity partner helping our customers migrate to the cloud? First one is clouds are vulnerable. The idea that it's more secure in the cloud at this point in time is not true. The second piece is that you're responsible for the data. You're responsible for your data. And now we're going to talk for a minute or two about the shared responsibility. So clouds are vulnerable. What does that mean? They have security. They have the capability. They tell you that we can activate rules and access control. But do they have full zero trust capability? Do they have full threat prevention capability? Do they control all the identities? The answer is no. When they talk about shared responsibility, that means that their links are set up properly. That means that their servers are protected. But it's still, when you bring on an application on top of their server and you say, I want to put this out on the internet, that's your responsibility. If it wasn't supposed to get onto the internet, that's your responsibility. Some of the things that we're also seeing is a lot of our organizations, a lot of our customers are using multiple clouds. And what I mean by that is they're using AWS for their data storage and development, but they're also a Microsoft customer. So they've gone to O365 and they've moved their Active Directory out to Azure. So now you have to have your Azure talking to your AWS. And how do you do that? Where does that go and how does that communicate? You also have to now protect both of those clouds. So how do you do that? Do you use Azure's native protections on their side and AWS's native protections on their side? Or do you try to figure out how to get something that's going to give you visibility and give you protections to not only the Azure environment or your AWS environment or your Google cloud environment, and your current network? All of these have to be tied together. So when I say that the events are becoming more sophisticated and there is a lateral spread of threats, is if they can get into your Active Directory and you're using your Active Directory to create your identity and your authentication pieces, once they get that, then they can get into your other space. So they're looking at account hijacking to be able to get into those different pieces. So as soon as you bring on your Active Directory, and this might be something that you've done a couple of years ago, or your Office 365, once you bring those on and they can get that, they just might sit and wait and watch what you do within other environments. As soon as you bring on your AWS environment, now they're going to try that Active Directory login over on your AWS environment because you're integrating the two of them together. Part of the problem with multiple clouds and also with your data center, back to the visibility piece. You have visibility into your data center, you control it, you manage it. You might have visibility into your Azure environment, but you may not have it into your AWS or your Google environment. This is where if you have something that can give you visibility across your entire environment and how things are communicating back and forth, you can visually see where you may end up having a problem. I'm going to repeat this again. You're still responsible. This slide I historically had, the title was, what are your concerns? What are the business concerns about moving to the cloud? And we changed this because we think that the responsibility that 95% of all cloud problems are due to some type of configuration issue or the customer doing something wrong. Not that the cloud in itself is bad, but that there's something that was configured wrong. So the study came back out after questions that we asked is what were their concerns? And 33% of the organization said visibility into their infrastructure was something they really need. And out of that visibility, they needed to make sure that they were compliant. So compliance and visibility were very important. I just wanted to make sure I tied the compliance and visibility and tied that together with responsibility. And the responsibility for the data is yours. So pressure. I wanted to, and I sort of jumped the gun a little bit. 95% of all cloud failures will be the customer's fault. Still, how do you protect against that? How do you make the decisions? What we've seen in the good section is we saw that the people that planned out their environment and the people that made sure that everybody was involved in the beginning, even though a lot of organizations get frustrated with the cybersecurity team because they try to slow things down, as you move to the cloud and you have less and less control of your environment, having visibility and having cybersecurity paying attention to this is the utmost important. So security in the cloud is really putting pressure on the enterprise. And I just mentioned this in the last slide. Clouds are subtle and nuances are abundant. What I mean by that is when you are looking at the AWS environment, the terms that you use in the AWS environment versus the terms and how Azure works, or the terms and how the functionality works in the G Suite, the Google environment, are different. They all act the same, but how they work and what you use as links and connections and private connections versus DMZ connections versus publicly routable addresses, and how many how many IP addresses do you use on the outside? How do you set up redundancy? All of these are just enough different that if you think that you have it the same in one versus the other, you don't. So this completely stretches your security team, right? Because the security team within your environment is also going to be responsible for the cloud security. And the problem that we're seeing is organizations are now taking that cloud responsibility and actually giving it to the developers and the application folks, which is good from the perspective of maybe finally security will get put into applications. Instead of a wrapper around the application, it'll roll into the application. So that's actually good. But in the short term, your enterprise team is responsible for the security across your entire environment. So the other thing that we saw, and that happens to be part of the ugly one, was the idea of what they wanted to do started out very simple. We wanted to move application A to the cloud. So they picked up application A and they moved it to the cloud. Then they realized that they were querying database B to the cloud. So they grabbed a subset of database B and moved it to the cloud. But database B was actually communicating to an internal database C. So they picked up those subsets and moved those to the cloud, but they couldn't get those links to work correctly. So they created an external IP address link from their internal database C to talk to their application. So as they thought that all I needed to do was move a single application to the cloud, it rolled into a much bigger environment. But as they were doing this, it required different teams. The app team started it, the development team and the database team was rolled in to figure out how to get the database operational and just keep a small subset. When it was all said and done, they had 25 different instances that were all intercommunicating to each other. If any one of those instances went down, their entire system went down. So the idea of the cloud of getting into this redundant environment really didn't help them very much. So complex changes on attack surfaces. This goes back to the conversation I was having just a few minutes ago about one of the things that organizations did first was let's move to some type of SaaS solution. Let's move to Office 365. It's cheaper, it's more efficient. We can put our mail in the cloud, our mail up into the cloud. You can get to it anywhere. There's no direct communications back. Well, as soon as you do that, you eliminated your historical old school networking security, because now people can connect from their home directly to the cloud. The second thing they did is, well, let's offload our Active Directory, let's offload our identity capabilities, and let's put that into the cloud, because the majority of our workforce is now working from home. So let's move that out there so it's much easier to maintain. Those are two attack surfaces that have nothing to do with protecting the data that you have over in the AWS environment. But if you're using your Active Directory as authentication to get to your data in the AWS environment, then it has everything to do with it. And hackers know this. They know if I can get your environment from the identity perspective, I can get it into your other environment. So, and the last thing that I wanted to talk about on this slide is the defenses in themselves. I say they're young and evolving. I historically have said they're young and evolving. Over the last little bit, I think that there's enough technology out there in the cloud native space of organizations that may have been networking organizations at one point in time, but they've been able to move into the cloud native space. That is no longer young and evolving. The young and evolving part is organizations wanting to make different decisions on different cloud environments. and they end up with a very large sprawl of security devices. Most organizations, you can consolidate your environment, so your cloud and your network and your mobile and your endpoint all can be using a good portion of the same technology, and then you can add on individual subsets for managed detection response or vulnerability management or multi-factor authentication. You can add those on as separate instances. The problem that we see is that as organizations go to Office 365, they buy a security solution. As they go to Active Directory and bring something on, they go to another security solution. As they bring on AWS to store data, they go to another security solution. As they bring in applications and development, they start trying to figure out how to use Kubernetes and how to containerize things and do specific actions. So they bring in another security solution. So now you've got 15 security solutions that are increasing the pressure on your enterprise IT team, because sooner or later, all of that will be handed over to your IT security team and going, here, you run it. So we see that as being a major issue. So another way of saying it is your responsibility is you got to protect yourself from you. And what does that mean? Security is your problem. And we also know that 95% of all the problems that you're going to have with security in the cloud are going to be your fault. So what do? You have to maintain some type of visibility into that cloud. You have to be able to have a plan from the beginning of not just what are we going to do about moving the application to the cloud, but how do we secure it? And what do we do if we have an issue? What do we do when the application developer is working on revision B and they needed to use a real active data set? So they create a outside link to the production database that should have been worked on the inside, but they needed that connectivity to make it work. They don't think they have a problem, but taking us back to that honeypot, it only takes less than 15 minutes for somebody to find something that's publicly routable on the cloud. And it's not the cloud's concern, the cloud provider's concern, to be able to protect that, because it was your decision to expose that to the cloud. So how do you protect you from you? One of the ways is maintaining visibility from the beginning. And I wanted to talk about the idea of what we saw as a cybersecurity or integrator. What our jobs and roles are is making sure that our customers are secure. Our original tagline is, and you can't really see it, but in the bottom right-hand corner, it says, we exist to secure your network. So the question is, what is your network when you move to the cloud? So we exist to secure your infrastructure, your environment, wherever it sits. If it's in the cloud, if it's in the network, if it's in the on your endpoint, if it's on mobile, no matter what it is, our goal is to make sure we help you protect your environment. And so the goal for this whole presentation was to talk to you about what we've seen, what works and what doesn't work. So to wrap things up, and then I was going to have Checkpoint talk a little bit about their visibility product and what they do and how it can help in other environments. So there's a lot of stuff on this slide and a lot of things that we're just going to leave. We can make this slide available to you, but I'm just going to touch on them slowly. I'm not going to read the slide to you. The idea of your security in your network, keeping a front door locked is a great idea. But as we're moving to the borderless environments, borderless infrastructure, COVID-19 really exposed this, which was kind of nice and bad for everybody that had to live through getting everybody working from home. But what we're seeing is the environment that used to be your network, where you had all the controls. You could clearly see the bottom of your swimming pool. You could clearly see that all your edges of your swimming pool weren't linking. As we were moving to the cloud, as you moved your data to the cloud, as you moved your applications and started using services in the cloud like Salesforce and Dropbox and things that you would have originally done in your data center, we're seeing the attack vectors grow. We're seeing them get into a more complex environment. So we also see that has led to making sure that everything that you used to do in your data center as siloing and segmenting is that you need to do that in the cloud too. But how do you do that? In the ugly example we used is instead of trying to figure out how to clean up their silos before they moved into the cloud, they were such a rush to move to the cloud, they took their flaws with them. And it just created a bigger mess in that environment. In the end, and I've busted on DevOps a couple times in here, but the idea of development operations and the idea of taking development and wrapping the business back into development, not just developing it, but whatever my business is, not just the application, but I need a secure application. And wrapping that back into the development operations is really kind of neat. That takes you into the idea of containers within the cloud and being able to spin up certain things to do a specific action and then bring it back down. But then how do you protect it? So you actually have to build your security into the very beginning of the process. And if that security is different than your other security, now your IT team has gotten more pressure on because now they have to look at 2 different spots for security or 3 different spots. So our recommendations in the end is fairly simple. You need a plan. You need to have visibility, and you need to make sure that cybersecurity is involved in the beginning. Because when we get involved, it's typically after a business has hired a consultant to migrate stuff to the cloud. They've already started the process, and then the IT team comes in and says, well, how are we securing this? And the cloud migration team consultant says, well, we're just leveraging AWS's native security, that standard access control. Well, how do you know that that's good enough? Because in the end, me as the IT security guy are the ones that the responsibility is going to fall onto. You're going to make the changes as that consultant. You're going to make the changes. You're going to move the stuff there, wipe your hands of it, get paid, and move on to the next customer. And then we're left holding the bag of trying to figure it out. So if you get the cybersecurity team involved in the beginning, it really works better for you. One couple of guidelines that I wanted to mention to you, and this is one of my final slides, is I'm just going to bring them all up at once. And the idea, and I'm going to just sort of wrap this all up in one big piece, is you need to secure your everything. And what I mean by that is you still have to have your front door locked at your network level. And with cloud in the environment, you need to protect every part of your cloud. You need to protect your applications that you're running, your SaaS services that you're running. If you're having DevOps bringing up serverless systems or starting to use containers, you need to make sure that they have development or security wrapped around that. Because like we showed you in that honeypot, it takes seconds, if not minutes, for the bad guys to find your environment and figure out how to stuff something in it. So even if you're just bringing something up for a second, if that's enough for them to figure out where it is and to be able to watch and track for it to come up the next time, they're going to try to throw malware in it. If that malware comes up, next time it spins up, guess what's in your system? Malware. So you need to protect all your assets no matter where. You need to protect across your data center. So if you're using Azure to do your standard administrative IT work like Active Directory and mail services and stuff, but you're using AWS or G Suite or somebody else, or even still your private environment, you need to make sure that they're all tied together. Number 2 is the all disciplines. So one of the neat things about containerizing or serverless, which I always chuckle about serverless because serverless really isn't serverless. It's just a reduced model. But a container is just reducing the amount of things that need to be brought up to take an action. So if I need to do a single query on a database or need to do a single action in a database, and the database only needs 10 libraries from the operating system, then just bringing that piece up and just running that specific item is really good because it reduces the amount of attack vectors that you can have. That's truly what hardening in all disciplines is all about. If you can harden it, reduce the attack vectors, you're getting better off. Compliance. Every organization, the three references of the good and the bad and the ugly that I showed had to do with three banking industry environments. One of them, part of the ugly one, was also part of a hotel chain. So out of all of those, they all lost private information. So what private information are you willing to give up from your bank? What private information are you willing to give up from your hotel information? If you're not willing to give any of that up, then this is really something that's necessary. All those had PCI compliance requirements. And then the last piece, I'm going to skip over access and threats because they're pretty self-explanatory. But DLP, another way of looking at the discipline is to see what's moving and when is it moving and how is it moving. Enabling DevOps and IT, well, I've talked about that. That's all about the plan, getting everybody together. So one of the things I do want to mention about all these different designs and the guidelines is I always look at things from as the cybersecurity integrator is pre-infection, during infection, and post-infection. Because the ultimate goal is to stand up an environment that never gets hacked. So I want to prevent everything. The second goal is during infection, what happens? Can I do something in that environment? Is there incident response? Is there things that I can do within the environment? And then post-infection is there anything that I can do to make sure that it doesn't happen again, right? DLP, data loss protections, a lot of times is actually working on the post-infection space. So at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Terry Cavanagh to join. I'm hoping I can do this. Yep. Terry, you there?
I am on, yes.
All right, great. So, Terry, I would like for you, Terry Cavanagh is the area manager for Checkpoint Software Technologies within the Winston-Salem, North Carolina area. And I'd like for him just to talk a few minutes about what Checkpoint can do within the visibility space. And then if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to watch the questions and chat section. So Terry, it's in your hands.
Great, thank you very much, Craig. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining. As Craig said, I'm the territory manager for the Triad area for Checkpoint, and some of you folks I see that are on the call I do know. So again, thanks for joining. To Craig's point, one of the things that we see as a vendor, right, as one of the folks out peddling our wares, is when we talk to companies, organizations, one of the first questions is, obviously everybody has some interest or some strategy to the cloud, but why are they doing it, right? The whole idea of digital transformation and this whole concept of we're going to take our applications or we're going to build applications and running on somebody else's computer out in the public space. They're doing it for being able to be, to basically allow them to be more nimble and be able to respond to market conditions and drive business more effectively than they have from their kind of brick and mortar data centers. We do find a lot of times when we talk to customers, they don't even, in some cases, some security organizations don't even know that, they basically tell us that, well, we don't really have a, we don't really intend to be heavy in the cloud. Well, when you talk to the DevOps team or other people in the organization, you find out there actually are business applications in the cloud. The security people just don't know about it. So it's sort of scary. One of the products that Checkpoint has to enable security teams to have better visibility and ensure compliance and prevent misconfigurations, probably most importantly, is a product we refer to as Dome 9. Dome 9 is a company that we acquired about 1.5 years ago that provides something called cloud security posture management. And you're going to be hearing that a lot going forward as your organization continues to adopt more of a cloud posture. What Dome 9 does is provides, there's a multitude of things that it does. It's particularly effective in environments where there's multiple public cloud environments. It provides a deep visibility into all the applications, how the applications are configured, how the assets are communicating with each other, whether any particular compliance requirements are not being met. It helps automate reports. It provides an abundance of detail that just kind of the standard issue security that the vendors provide, the cloud providers offer, just can't match. It's a much more robust and rich reporting mechanism, and it allows for really for organizations to be able to speed their delivery of security services for their applications and our assets that exist in the public cloud space. So, you know, given the, I think we're kind of running short on time here, but just given the information that we find from organizations, pretty much everybody's moving to a cloud posture in one way or another. Many are going into a multiple into multiple clouds and the multiple public clouds, and the Dome 9 product really helps them with a shortened window of ensuring that their assets and their applications are protected in the public cloud space. I think just from a use perspective, the cost versus benefit of being able to have that kind of an automated tool for a security team is, it shows tremendous value. And again, in the interest of protecting your company's business and ensuring that their cloud migration is successful, adopting that technology in the early stages of the cloud migration is an important element to success. So Dome 9 is the product. I'd be happy to send some information your way, have a more in-depth discussion, demonstration perhaps, if you're interested. Just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to spend some time and go through the product set in a more comprehensive way. Craig, any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Terry, for that. I'm glad, yeah, that was quick and much more efficient than my 50 minutes. I wanted to thank everybody for joining the call today, and don't forget about all the rest of the presentations that are already scheduled for today. Make sure you participate in those. If you want to get a hold of me, you can email me, you can give me a call, whichever way you want. This whole thing has been recorded, so if you wanted to go back and watch the recording, you can also do that. Evelyn will probably be making those available at some point in time here in the near future. But thanks for joining me this morning, and hopefully you all enjoy the rest of the event.
Thanks so much, guys. That was great. Take care. Have a great day.
Great, thank you.